What's up, everybody? My name is Big Cam and welcome back to another Comically Boston breakdown episode. And today we are breaking down House of the Dragon Season 3 Episode 2, Queen's Landing, which normally it's King's Landing, but now it shall be the Queen's Landing. Ha ha! What is wrong with me? I don't know. Didn't get much sleep last night. Let's roll into it. I was too busy thinking about what happened in House of the Dragon. Oh, what a season so far. It's only been 2 episodes. God, I love this show though. But the scale in these first 2 episodes, it seemed like the budget they got for this season 3, they're using all of it, right? Like that boat battle in episode 1, the dragons in episode 2. Freaking cool as hell, man. Love this stuff, really do. Let alone in the Game of Thrones, sword fighting and all that universe. But dragons, dude, oh, I love dragons, but I also love Game of Thrones. House of the Dragon mixes the both of them so much more. Fucking primo stuff we got going on here, folks. So let's jump right on into it with the previously on, the last episode of episode 1, Salt and Sea, Fire and Blood. We saw Rhaena claimed Sheep Stealer, and later, while trying to take him back to Dragonstone, they see the Battle of the Gullet going on, and they go to help. But that ends poorly, especially for her sister Baela. Ooh. But I guess we will see if that causes issues between the 2 sisters and the rest of the Targaryens. But meanwhile, Aegon and Larys were fleeing King's Landing and they were captured by some men on Team Black. But Larys was able to save their asses by telling them that this is Aegon the Usurper and they're getting brought to Dragonstone the last time we saw them. Daemon and his army blooded their swords, and then they met the Winter Wolves with Tommy Flanagan playing one of the leaders of the Winter Wolves, saying, "We've come to die for the Dragon Queen." Fucking love the Winter Wolves already. Also, Aemon One-Eye proved just how Targaryen he really is by kissing his own mother. Gross. Then also with the lowborn dragon riders, there's some weird stuff with them going on in what is happening over there at the God's Eye. Alice Rivers is a witch. Deer men? What is going on here? And apparently these deer men are called green men. And we actually saw one of these in the brief flashback, or like Daemon saw one of these at Harrenhal. At just a brief moment in the season finale last year. But the big thing that happened in episode 1 was Jace locked his mother Rhaenyra in her room and went to fight the Battle of the Gullet for her. And Rhaenyra is so pissed about this, but it seems that this might have woken up the king inside Rhaenyra. But we also saw Corlys was fighting Lohar on the Battle of the Gullet on his ship after it got rammed by the Bitch Fist. And Corlys was last seen falling into the water whilst fighting Lohar before Alan of Hull goes, "Father!" and jumps into the fight, and him and Lohar go tumbling into the water, but he stabs her in the neck and kills her. So good for Alan of Hull embracing his father, you know, "Father!" protecting him. But Alan was too late because Lohar had already shot a bolt, and the Triarchy was able to take down Jace in Vermax, and Vermax drowns down to the bottom of the ocean, which was definitely so much sadder than seeing Jace die. But just when you thought Jace was gonna make it, he got shot with multiple arrows and he dies, and that was the end of episode 1. And I was just devastated by this whole first episode, but it was just such a good episode, and there's a full breakdown for this up on the channel now if you want to go see my thoughts on that. But Harry, the man who plays Jace, posted this sad image, which looks like a water painting or some sorts, of Jace in Lucerys, and he comments, I think Elliot is the kid who played Lucerys, who died at the end of season 1, I think. So, you know, he got all of season 2, and then he dies at the beginning of season 3, and he's like, "I'm with you now, brother." And I was just like, oh, God, don't make it sadder than it already is. Poor Rhaenyra lost friggin' both of her sons, both strong boys, and now friggin', oh, they're off in heaven together. That's so sad. But also a little missed detail from last week. Sheep Stealer, when heading into battle, it seemed like a bolt bounced off of Sheep Stealer's gut, right? So it didn't hit like a harness or anything, because Sheep Stealer's wild. He didn't have like a saddle like the other ones did. So it looks like Sheep Stealer has some armored skin, and a bolt was was able just to bounce right off of him. And I was like, hey, good for Sheep Stealer. But also like, oh, Sheep Stealer needs some serious training. But then, of course, after the recap, there's the wonderful Game of Thrones intro for House of the Dragon this time, though, and it is a little different for Season 3. It looks very, very similar to Season 2, but there is some subtle differences. And they did add to the intro for Episode 2, adding Jace's death to the end of the intro card, and I was just like, ah, guys, it's too soon. But we open Episode 2, Queen's Landing, underwater as, I believe it's Jace's body floats on the surface. But there's also another body in the water floating, and we see the Battle of the Gullet, but from the underwater, as we see a fireball get shot over, and then dragon fire come over on the other side. I was like, holy shit, I didn't think a dragon battle could look this cool underwater, right? You can't even see what's going on, but yet it still looked so cool. I was like, oh my god, I love this. But it was also just such a sad little scene because we see the dragon fire overhead as the battle still rolls on, and it transitions from the blood of one of the bodies underwater to the foggy red sky. It almost looks like a blood ash, a blood-filled sky of the Battle of the Gullet, and it's all foggy from the ash from the other dragons burning the rest of the ships, and maybe this was just Bela doing all of this with Moondancer by herself, but it looked like maybe Sheep Stealer stuck around. Like, I thought initially Sheep Stealer took off at the end of last episode, but maybe Sheep Stealer stuck around, or maybe it was the 3 lowborn dragons, and it was Silverwing and Ulf on Silverwing, and Vermithor and Sea Smoke. But we cut to see Bela flying Jace's body, and she's like on Moondancer, and his body's like draped over her lap as she's like flying Jace's body back to Dragonstone. And as they land in Dragonstone, the guard who Jace made lock Rhaenyra's door asks, "The battle," and Bela's like, "It is won." So it seems like this is a victory for Team Black, and this is what Jace wanted, right? He wanted to go win a victory for his mother, but at what cost? Because they have lost their prince as they carry him back into Dragonstone in his lifeless corpse. Oh, poor Jace. But poor Rhaenyra, because Rhaenyra then walks in and sees Jace's lifeless body on a stretcher and is so distraught when she sees his body, and she tries to like talk to him, and she's like, Jace, Jace, what have you done? How could you do this to me? You know, and like she's breaking down on top of him, and she's like, you know, crying, and the guard tries to pull her off, and she's like, how dare you touch me? And Sir Lawrent, the guard, says he has failed her, and he, you know, holds up his sword, and he goes, my life is forfeit. But Rhaenyra, you know, yells at him, and she's like, fucking, so you failed me. What does that, we're killing you now, what does that get me? Nothing. Does it change that you have failed, or that Jace has failed? No. Does it change that you have failed me or betrayed me? And then she yells at everybody in the room, and she's like, all of you have betrayed your queen, before she then starts ugly crying. And then she, you know, goes back to Jace. She's holding him, and there's snot everywhere, and crying, just real tears. I was like, oh, poor Emma Darcy and Rhaenyra right now, just ugly crying for the love of the game. But she's also, you know, holding her heir to the throne and her second now dead son, but this time it was her firstborn. Oh. We then cut over to Alan of Hull, and he's out in the aftermath looking for Corlys, and he just sees bodies spewed everywhere, and he's like out on the boat, and he's just like, Corlys! You know, like, he's got a small crew with him, and they're out searching for their Lord Commander and their captain. We then see Rhaena and Sheep Stealer goes back to the Lady of the Vale to ask for asylum and for protection. And she's like, what, you think Rhaenyra and them won't come for you? And she's like, nobody saw me on the back of them. I just need to asylum, and we just need to stay here. And it seems like maybe the Lady of the Vale is going to let her and Sheep Stealer stay outside of the Vale, but she's not allowed back inside type of shit. Even though, you know, Rhaenyra offered her protection. She was like, you wanted a dragon to protect you, didn't you? That's what I offer. And Rhaenyra's offering this, but like, she can't necessarily be offering this. Like, Sheep Stealer is very ruthless and not trained at all. So like, what kind of protection is Sheep Stealer really going to be able to offer? Like, if anything, Sheep Stealer is just going to do whatever the fuck he wants. And the Lady of the Vale either suddenly says that Rhaena can stay with Sheep Stealer, but like, you know, outside, or she just doubles down and says, no, I don't wish to ever see you again. And it's like, well, okay. I don't know how that worked out, but I guess we'll find out next episode. But we then cut over to some cheery moment of the episode as Daemon and his army are drinking and singing ditties out in the woods. And this is a really great scene, actually, as each person is like, you know, Tommy Flanagan gets a line singing with the Winter Wolves. Even little Lord Tully gets to sing a line, and he definitely does not have a singing voice. He's like going through puberty. And it's really funny, this whole singing scene in the woods, because they're all like chanting, fish feed, fish feed, fish feed. But it's obviously a song that they just made up after winning their last battle. But they're all, you know, celebrating their wins and their victory here. When Sir Simon Strong comes with wine, and they're all like, wine, you know, and there's more booze for the crew. But he also has a message for Daemon, and it's from Queen Rhaenyra. And he gets the news of Jace's death, and they're all like sitting there partying, and they all notice Daemon sit down. They're like, what happened? And he informs them of Jace's death and that he wants to, you know, go to King's Landing with Rhaenyra. And he's like, I am to go there. You are to head there with some troops, head some people off to the garrison at Harrenhal, and yeah, cut down everybody in your path. And he like takes one more drink, throws it, spikes at the ground. He goes, till the next time I see you all, lads. You know, like, and oh man, I really was hoping Daemon would stay here with his army, because I really thought we were about to have some more time and vibing with this army, guys. And I really hope we see much more of the Winter Wolves. But as Daemon's leaving, it's actually quite funny. He goes and talks to Alice Rivers as he's about to get on Caraxes. And there's actually this great shot of Caraxes drinking water. And like, two things. I didn't know dragons drank water, one. You know, I just didn't even, you know, they spew fire. I didn't think water would go in it too, but you know, they're animals. I'm sure all animals drink water. But just seeing the detail of Caraxes drinking water, and then like the way that like his head came out of the water and it just like dripped, real practical drips into the water. I was like, how do they do this? Did they just stick a buck, like a fake Caraxes head in the water and then just let it like drag the water up naturally? Either way, I thought that shot looked really good, even though it had nothing to do with the scene. But Alice Rivers, as she's talking to Daemon, she's like, listen, you're going to the Queen. Ask her, you know, I want something for giving her 40,000 rivermen fighting for her. And he like kind of looks and like, what do you want? She says she wants Harrenhal. She goes, she's lived there her whole life and nobody appreciates it. She's watched it get handed to king, and everybody hates Harrenhal and nobody cares for it the way she would. And Daemon goes, you know, you have no lord name, you have no royal husband. We're not just in the practice of handing out castles to midwives. And she's like, is that all you see me as? And she gets all pissed and tells him to go home and never come back. You know what I told you, which I think was like, you will die here or something like that. So I don't know, maybe if Daemon does return to Harrenhal, it will be the last thing he does. Ooh. We then cut back to Alan of Hull as he is walking amongst a shore of bodies in search for Corlys, and he's like checking each body like, no, that's not my father, that's not my father. But there is just bodies screwed everywhere from this battle, and all of the ones from the ships that are washing up on shore. And then there's more fighting just taking place on land now that all these people that were on boats and those boats got wrecked. Anybody that swam to shore is now still fighting on shore, which is just hilarious that the Battle of the Gullet just keeps raging on, but on to shore now. But as Alan is walking the shore looking for Corlys, Bela in Moondancer flies over, and she comes and lands and comes to speak to him, saying they will find him. And she offers him some booze, and he kind of like chokes on it for a second. And they talk about Corlys, you know, her being grandsire to him, and she talks about the love for Rhaenys and the queen who never was. And she was like, honestly, I think it was his love for his wife, which she goes, she's never really seen somebody love his wife so much, especially in this era. It was like they got married and then they were just cheating with whores at the brothel still, you know. So a guy that genuinely loved his wife, and you know, that is why he loved Rhaenys so much that he couldn't see his bastard children, because he didn't want to disrespect her. But he already did by cheating and doing whatever he did whenever he was on the sea snake doing his thing. But like, poor Alan's like, what the fuck, like, I'm a piece of shit, you know, like, Corlys doesn't give a shit about me. And, you know, they talk about the man he is and, like, how stern he can be. And he's like, oh, I know that version of him. She's like, oh, yeah. So they kind of have this bonding moment here where I think it's, what, half brother and granddaughter, so maybe like cousin or something, I don't know. But it looks like Alan is ready to give up on this search for Corlys, but Bela's not ready to give up on him. And Alan asks her about her betrothed, asking about Jace. And she says that she's tired of losing people, Alan. And then they look up and he sees his brother Adam on back of Sea Smoke, and she goes, he's searching too, right? So they're both, you know, all three of them, Bela, the granddaughter, and the two half-sons are out looking for their father, you know? And as Adam is on back of Sea Smoke, flying overhead, he notices Corlys is washed up on shore, and it looks like maybe he's still breathing, so maybe still alive. Nice. We then cut back to Aegon and Larys, and they're still in the back of the Raven cart, and they start bickering when Larys is like, are you still in pain? And he's like, no. And he goes, oh really? You haven't been asking for milk of the poppy? And he goes, that's because I'm not talking to you. And the way that the two of them just started bickering at each other reminded me of me and my roommate. Just like two people that have spent too much time together. And it's like, listen, we're friends, we're not friends, fuck you, I hate you, whatever. Nah. You know, like ready to grab each other by the throat and kill each other. But then, as they're bickering, the cart stops, and he kind of looks out and he's like, I wonder what this is. He goes, I'm sure we'll be moving in a second. And then the door gets ripped open, and some guy's like, what is this? And he gets shot by an arrow. And Larys is like, I have been mistaken. I am surprised. I don't know what's going on here. And Larys quickly deduces that the other Lannister twin got the Triarchy to fight for the Greens in this battle against Team Black. You know, so the Triarchy now on land, like I was just talking about with the Battle of the Gullet, in that whole fight now making its way onto land, it now has made its way into the path of this cart, and it looks like the drivers of this cart got killed in this little battle too. And I just really loved in this scene though that Aegon like walks out and takes an arrow out of some guy's back, and then it looks like he snaps the arrow and he just got like the arrowhead in hand, and Larys hits some guy with a friggin' crate and he goes on the ground, and Aegon gets out and stabs him and kills a guy with the little arrowhead. And I was like, okay, Aegon, I didn't know you had that in you. Good for you, brother. And this is like a hurt Aegon, burned and shit. Like, this isn't like a full prime Aegon ready to fight, you know? Like, he's on the bottom, lowest of the low, and he's able to fight and kill this guy and do what he needs to do. I was like, shout out Aegon, dude. Good for you. I didn't know I was going to start liking Aegon, but maybe this season Aegon is really going to go on an arc that changes him as a character. Hopefully for the better. But after Aegon kills this guy, he's like, I'm not going to Dragonstone, I'm going to Rook's Rest. Kristen Cole has a garrison there, they'll friggin' heed my command or whatever. And, you know, Larys is like, no, we need to go that way, sir, we need to get to the coast. Fuck, you know, and he's not listening. And so he's like, fuck, god damn it. You know, and all Larys needs Aegon to do is listen to him, because Larys is pretty damn smart, but Aegon is king, so he's not going to listen to anybody. He thinks he's still in charge, you know what I mean? So Aegon is heading towards Rook's Rest, so maybe he's going to reunite with Sunfire. I don't know if Sunfire is officially dead in the show, or if he was just grounded by, like, Rook's Rest. So who knows? Maybe Sunfire will come marching through some trees as a big fatty, and Aegon will be like, what happened to you? And Sunfire will be like, I'm cool. I can't fly, though, because I've been eating. I've been real fat. I ate all these bodies. Well, yeah, you know what happens. We're not king anymore, so I let myself go. You know, like, maybe the dragon got real fat, and then he's gonna ride him more like a elephant than a dragon. But we then cut over to the beach where Corlys is still alive with his two bastard sons and granddaughter, and Corlys says, if this be victory, I hope I never see another, while he's looking at his burned down home with all of his treasures and wealth gone. And he stands up and says to Alan, I have nothing to give you now but my name. And Alan says, and yet I count that of more worth than a mountain of gold, as the last four Valerians look at high tide smoking in the distance. Kind of sad. And I think maybe Bela might be a Targaryen because Daemon is her father, but, you know, she's still Valerian. If anything, these are the last four black Targaryens in this universe, and for whatever reason they don't continue on into Game of Thrones or even A Knight of the Seven Kingdoms. There's just like no black folks with the white hair and dragons going to continue on into the future. For whatever reason, they're wiped out. Maybe because high tide burned down right here. Maybe this is the reason why the Valerians never make it into the future. Meanwhile, at King's Landing, Alicent goes to the Gold Cloak's locker room with a bunch of dudes swinging dong, and she just walks in like nothing, and she's just like, I need to speak to the Lord Commander, and she's like, sorry to interrupt everybody, and they're just like, we're not interrupted, the Queen just saw my balls, you know, like, the dudes seemed real happy to just be like standing there. They didn't even say anything. They all just stood there with their junk out, just locked eyes with the Queen. And Olivia Cook's just like, oh, nice penis, nice penis, nice penis. Lord Commander, how are you? You know, like, damn. But Alicent has come to the Lord Commander to tell him about Rhaenyra coming, and he's like, this could be treason. Some people would see this as treason, but she's trying to see if like he's on board or not with this plan, and they don't necessarily give you an answer right now, but we find out later his answer, and it's a good moment when you're like, uh-oh, is this going to be bad or good? And then you're like, yeah. We then see Daemon return to Dragonstone, and as he walks in, he sees Ulf the White and Hugh Hammer, and Ulf's like, the Rogue Prince, and he goes to like hug him, but like Daemon just looks at him like, what are you doing here? And Ulf was like, well, you know, well, there was some stuff going on, and we thought maybe there was a mistake, so we came back. And he goes, you're supposed to be out looking for Aemon One Eye and Vhagar, are you not? Yeah. And they go, and he's like, you gave up after 2 days? What kind of guys are you? He's like, and I didn't know the Queen ever needed your thoughts of this matter. We didn't ask you what you thought. We just need you to ride the dragon and fight. You are not in any position to be making commands, demands, talking, anything. And then Ulf's like, but there was some creepy shit going on in that island. I saw a and just as he's about to tell Daemon all the creepy stuff that was going on at the God's Eye, and honestly, maybe Daemon should have listened to what was going on at the God's Eye. And he backhands Ulf. Oh god, I was dying at this scene. But Daemon then goes up to Rhaenyra's room and sees Mysaria standing right outside. And they talk for a moment as former lovers, but also like, he goes, I left you and you were a prisoner. How the hell have you weaseled your way back in here? And he's like, makes her sound like a snake. He's like, do you coil yourself to strike at me now? And she's like, it's not all about you, Daemon. And he's like, all right, well. So he sits down and they talk, and do you think the Queen's judgment is sound? You know, and they have a conversation. Do you think her and Alicent could really have trust that goes back even after everything that's happened? And he's like, perhaps. And he's like, I've always seen her as a conspirator rather than a knowing, you know, causer of chaos. But then Mysaria calls her a tool, and I was like, But so as Daemon and Mysaria are talking, a maester comes up to inform them that Vhagar is heading to the Riverlands, and Daemon goes in to talk to Rhaenyra, who has been bedridden and not talking to her council ever since Jace is dying. And, you know, Daemon comes in and says, he died fighting for his queen, as he desired. And Rhaenyra brings up Sheepstealer, the wild dragon, and she wants Daemon to find the rider. And he's like, how could the Greens have gotten another dragon? You know, so like, he goes, there's no way. Wild dragons can't be tamed. And so it looks like Rhaena is the first person to tame a wild dragon. But Rhaenyra also thinks whoever this rider of Sheepstealer is who is at fault for Jace's death. Ooh. So maybe Rhaenyra and Baela don't know that Rhaena is the rider of Sheepstealer at the moment, but when Daemon finds out it's one of his own daughters, he might be okay with it as long as it's not the Greens who don't have more dragons. But when Baela and Rhaena find out, that's probably going to be bad, you know, like, oh. But then Daemon informs Rhaenyra of Vhagar's movement, and she's like, oh, so Alicent did say he was going to be heading to the Riverlands, so with Vhagar not at King's Landing, it might be time for them to strike and go through with their plan. But Rhaenyra cries, remembering both of her boys and remembering them when they were little, crying into her dress. And she's like, and now they are both dead so that I can sit on a throne of swords. And Daemon asks her if she's going to let them die in vain. And he whispers whispers in her ear about the dream he saw in like of Game of Thrones and the Song of Ice and Fire. And I loved this little scene because like he's like the only one who could get Rhaenyra back on her feet and back into the fight is Daemon. And he's like, I saw it, Rhaenyra, the darkness in the north, the Song of Ice and Fire. I saw a girl with silver hair in a desert far away, and there were dragons at her breast. Oh, chills just tying in Game of Thrones and Daenerys Targaryen, just being like, listen, one day all the dragons will be gone, and then they will come back, baby. Oh, fuck, I can't believe they really fucked up the end of Game of Thrones so bad. Like, I want another season of Game of Thrones where, oh, guess what? Rhaenyra is still alive, or not Rhaenyra, fucking the woman queen, Daenerys is still alive, right? And because the last time we seen her, Drogon grabbed her and flew off somewhere. So wherever Drogon brought her, some magic shit happens. Daenerys is still alive. Drogon gets bigger. Maybe Drogon even has some eggs, so then we have some more hatched dragons, you know, so you could have another season of Game of Thrones where you have Dany back, you have Drogon back, you have more dragons. I mean, shit, maybe you even bring Dany back somehow, and she has purple eyes like they should have had it the whole time in the book, you know, maybe they could do that. Maybe Jon Snow is so distraught on the wall because he killed the love of his life, but when he finds out she's still alive, maybe he goes on a journey to get back to her. He finally gets back to her, and Drogon is ordered to kill him, but doesn't because he is the king who never was, and, you know, the prince who was promised, whatever. And they are meant to be together, so they make up, they kiss, and then they go and kill everybody. I don't know. That's my dream for Game of Thrones and continuing that, but for the time being, at least we still have House of the Dragon. But we then cut back to King's Landing, and Alicent is like packing up her stuff when Lord Jasper comes to her room and does some creepy stuff and tries to rape Alicent. I was like, ugh. Oh, Lord Jasper, what, ew, like, what are you doing? And like, he was getting aggressive with her, and luckily she like fights back, but it looked like he was just gonna get what he wanted and have his way with her when people rush into the room, and luckily the maester, the black guy there, the black maester, Ormond or something like that, but either way, Maester Orwell or something like that, but either way, the Maester comes in and saves Alicent and has him arrested, you know, in for a second he's trying to swing like, we have a traitor in our midst, arrest her, but he's like, I know what my eyes just saw, arrest him, he's the bad one here. So luckily Lord Jasper gets arrested for whatever he's just done to Alicent, and Alicent's like, I owe you my life, Maester, and he's like, I fear for what you have done, and I fear it's something desperate. And he's absolutely right, but whatever friggin' Lord Jasper was just doing, creepy as hell. And that's supposed to be the Lord of Laws. Oh, creepy stuff going on. Terrible guy. He deserves everything that happened to him. But cutting back to Dragonstone, it seems Rhaenyra is done talking as she heads up to her council, and she tells them that they are leaving, and she's like, and they're like, what do you mean you're leaving? And Daemon's just standing there like, I didn't hear her stutter. She just told you what's happening, and you're trying to tell her no? Fucking listen to your queen. God damn it. You know, and they're all like, you know, like, yeah, listen to your queen, bitch. So it seems Rhaenyra is done with the talking, and now she is heading to King's Landing with her dragons, and Mysaria hands her Viserys' crown, and, you know, she's like, remember who was faithful here, and it's kind of like, ooh, kind of creating a little drama between Daemon and Mysaria, right? So Daemon and his former lover, right, and also former prisoner now, so now it's his former lover and former prisoner is now like a trusted counsel for Rhaenyra, but also like hooking up with Rhaenyra. So like, poor Daemon is just like, what's going on here with them two? And even as they're walking out, he's like, so you got new counsel? She's like, I don't need your permission. He goes, I was just making an observation. Why are you getting so defensive? But so they take off on Dragonback, Syrax, Caraxes, Vermithor, and Silverwing. So 4 dragons, where I think in the books it was all 5, but in the show, they made Adam go off with Bela, so it looks like Seasmoke and Moondancer are together right now, and then these other 4 dragons are heading to King's Landing. Alicent, though, back at King's Landing, tells Helena that Rhaenyra is coming and tells her a bit of her plan. And she's like, that's crazy. But she's like, you're the queen and they will heed the queen's command. She's like, you're a queen. She goes, no, you are the queen. Like, come on, you need to help me here. And Alicent is trying to get the gold cloaks that are manning the wall, and they're like, you know, bolts that are manning the walls of the King's Landing. She's trying to get them to stand down and not open fire on Rhaenyra. And even like Helena like jumps in and she's like, I do not want any beast's heart. And she kind of like smiles and looks at her mom like, I'm helping, you know, like. But also Helena, she seems like she knows so much, right? Like, especially some of the stuff that happened last season. It seems like all these visions and stuff and all these dreams, it seems like Helena is really, really tapped into it. But it seems like she's also super autistic and like maybe even like a little Down syndrome or something, where she's like, you know, looking at bugs and like, she's like, you told me a while ago you weren't happy as queen, and I just want to do what makes you happy. And she goes, I think I want chickens. You know, like, and it's like, okay, but like, what in the autism is she up to? Like, not any hate on Helena, just like, she just noticing she's a little slow, maybe. We cut over to the woods with Criston Cole and his troops as they look up and hear Vhagar bellowing overhead as Vhagar's just flying over these woods and heading towards Harrenhal, and Criston Cole just says, off to Harrenhal. And they all like, rah, more fighting, yeah, you know, like, we've been camped out in these woods, time to fight, rah. But they immediately cut over to Vhagar arriving over Harrenhal, just looking absolutely massive, and he like burns all around Harrenhal, and Vhagar just looks so huge. And like the landing, when Vhagar lands and like sticks his face in the castle and like burns everybody in there and like burns out the small garrison that Daemon had left behind to defend it, you know. And then Aemon One-Eye dismounts Vhagar and takes care of any of the rest of the survivors in the building while Vhagar's in the background just cooking the rest of her food. In this scene, I'm not sure if this scene where he arrives at Harrenhal is the particular scene where they broke the record having like 25 people on fire at once, but it did look like a lot of practical people set on fire in this one little scene here at Harrenhal. But Aemon makes pretty short work of everybody else in the castle and kills everybody, and he makes his way to the main room where the Strongs are having dinner. And it's almost a side-by-side parallel of when Daemon arrived, but Aemon arrives a lot more aggressive. And where Daemon walked in and said, I'm taking Harrenhal, and then sat down and had dinner with them, Aemon One-Eye walks in and gets face-to-face with Simon Strong and these guys. And we all know Simon Strong. He is not a fighter in any sense of the word. And he's like, I don't wish to fight you, your king. You have won. You have taken the grounds. And he's like, get your sword. He goes, I haven't swung a sword in many years. And he's trying to like talk Aemon down. And Aemon like stabs him in the neck and kills Sir Simon Strong. I was like, oh, poor Strong. He didn't deserve that. And he kills him. And then he kills his two sons that are also there. Their sons are like, Father! One of them just gets sliced in the neck. One of the sons gets a stab in the back right between the armor, right? So it gets a little knife blade in just enough to hurt Aemon. But Aemon turns around and kills him as well. So Aemon just kills all of the Strong boys that are left in this castle, and they had surrendered. I was like, oh, Aemon, that was fucked up. But karma's on Aemon because that one little blood, like where he got stabbed, starts bleeding pretty bad, and all that's left is Alice Rivers. And he like walks towards her, and he like kind of collapses from bleeding too much, and then he starts to like beg her and like is pleading like, help me, please. Please help me. And Alice is just like looking down at him like, should I let him die and take the castle? Or should I help this one-eyed man? And I think this whole thing right here will start the rest of this season's journey for Aemon One-Eye. Right, where like season 2, Daemon was like locked in Harrenhal getting haunted for the entire season. I feel like season 3, this is what's going to happen to Aemon One-Eye. In the remaining, 5 or 6 episodes for this season, Aemon One-Eye is going to be getting haunted by Alice Rivers. But maybe He likes it. Meanwhile, Rhaenyra and her dragons now flying towards King's Landing, and they're arriving in King's Landing, and they land, and without much fuss, all of the green cloaks seem to stand down. None of them fire bolts at Rhaenyra and her dragons, and all the guys outside the walls open the gates and lay down their arms. So it seems like most of this is going to plan with Alicent's plan, and they're getting the King's Landing without much fuss. And they face no resistance outside, but once they enter inside, Daemon knows that this is the real test. And inside, Daemon takes care of like 8 green cloaks by himself, defending Rhaenyra as they march towards the throne room. But I have a clip here of Daemon really taking care of these guys. Oh, so good. And like the way that he landed outside of the walls with Caraxes and like Cyrax up on the wall, and like Vermithor and Silverwing flying around, and even like as they're flying through, like Hugh Hammer's wife sees, I think, him on back of Dragonback. She's like, what the fuck? How did you get a dragon, honey? This is where you've been this whole time? On the back of Vermithor? You know, like. But let's look at Daemon be a badass, slicing and dicing green cloaks. I like that little look at the end between Rhaenyra and Daemon. It's like, it's almost like Rhaenyra's like, oh, that was hot, you know, and like Daemon's looking at her like, do I make you horny, baby? You know, like, little Austin Powers reference for anybody that knows. But yeah, I think there's a line in the books where that says like, whether it was 6 men or 60, he's still Daemon Targaryen. And fuck yeah, he is. He just made short work of those guys, and those guys weren't like slouches. It wasn't like they had a bunch of bad fighters as the knights of their council. Like, these were all knights. Just Daemon Targaryen is Daemon fucking Targaryen. Didn't even take a scratch. Just fucking beat the shit out of them. As Rhaenyra's standing there like, do I need to get involved? Are you gonna protect me? Oh, good job, honey. You know, like. So Daemon and Rhaenyra walk into the throne room, and the throne gets blocked off by, I think, like one of the Lord Commanders and the rest of like the green cloaks that are still loyal to the greens. And they're like, fuck you, you know, and Daemon's like, alright, I'll fight the rest of you. Fucking Rhaenyra, stay close, and Rhaenyra pulls out a sword too. And at first I was like, where is this sword from? And I think this was Jace's sword, which just makes me so sad. But either way, Rhaenyra pulls out a sword because she's not being a queen that's just going to stand back and let everything else happen. She's going to fight if she needs to fight. And Daemon's like, alright, stay close. But then they get fully surrounded when a bunch of gold cloaks rush in too, and all of the rest of the city watch. And you're like, uh-oh, they're surrounded. Daemon's like, uh-oh, I'm going to have to really fight all of these guys 1 on 60. I mean, I know the book said I could handle it, but can I? You know, and I was like, oh my god, can he? You know? But it's this nice fake out moment because Alicent's plan from earlier when she went to talk to that Lord Commander in the locker room, seeing all those dongs, that dude is the head of the City Watch, and Daemon made him the head of that City Watch and put that cloak on him years ago. So these City Watch guys are all loyal to Daemon and still recognize Daemon as their commander. So when the blacks arrive and they have this one last little test of like the greens and who's gonna win, these gold cloaks make those other guys look like pussies, and they're like, nah, we're with the blacks, you stand down, pussies. And when like one guy gets dragged away and he's like, alright, drag them to the dungeon, and anybody else that's still team green, drag them to the dungeon too. And the guy looks, you know, and he's like, Sir Luther, good to see you. And he's like, my queen, the throne is yours. And Rhaenyra says, it's not her throne yet. Bring Aegon the Usurper to me.
Not yet. Bring Aegon the Usurper to me.
But you're like, uh-oh, they're going to search the castle and find Aegon. But no, Aegon's already disappeared. And as an audience, you know this, but you're like, oh, who are they going to find if not Aegon? Uh-oh. because she needs to make an example out of somebody, right? That's what she had said to Alicent last season. And they search the castle and find nothing. And the maester, you know, the poor black maester, Daemon finds, and he like makes him kneel to Daemon. But the maester says, maybe I have someone else I can offer you that would better satisfy him. As we then cut to Alicent trying to sneak out of King's Landing with Helena and their grandchild, and or her grandchild, maybe Helena's last surviving child, with Aegon, I believe. And Daemon goes down to the dungeon to see that Maester Orwell had given him Lord Jasper as the gift down in the dungeon, but some other guy down in the dungeon says that Lord Larys Strong left Daemon a gift, and he's like, huh. So he walks through this long dark path, and it's only lit by one torch that he's holding, and he walks up, and Daemon looks through this door like, what is this gift that Larys Strong left me? Like, I have no love for Larys Strong, but why would Larys leave this gift particularly for Daemon? And Daemon just starts evilly laughing, and I was like, huh, who is this gift? But we see that this gift was Otto Hightower down in the dungeons. So it was Larys Strong who kept him locked up down there this whole time? Interesting. Because Larys was trying to vie to become Hand of the King himself, and the last time we checked, Aemon One-Eye gave Larys an order to go fetch Otto Hightower to bring him back to be the Hand of the King. And he made this Larys's job. So Larys wasn't able to find Otto, but he knew Otto was down in that dungeon the whole time because he had him locked up there. So interesting. What is Larys Strong up to, and how smart is he really? But so Otto Hightower gets walked in, and you know, they got to make an example out of somebody. So he's like, this guy can stand in the place of Aegon, and he, you know, is looking at Rhaenyra like, you got to do this. You got to show them, if you want to rule, you got to show them that you will rule with strength. And Otto looks at her like, oh no, you're not going to do this. Please have Daemon do it. Spare me getting hacked to death. And oh, he was right too, but no, it has to be Rhaenyra to show her strength as a ruler, and Daemon gives her Dark Sister, the Valyrian steel blade, so it should be able to cut clean right through the head, no problem, and strike down Otto. And he says, in this moment, you will become queen. And Rhaenyra is like, I don't know if I can, but then she, you know, musters up the courage and she goes to do it, and Otto starts talking, and like you can just tell in Rhaenyra's head she's like, oh god, shut up, and she kind of like almost closes her eyes and she swings, and the first swing should have killed Otto, but she's not trained with a sword, so she just hits him in the shoulder blade, right? And he had given her the neck too. He gave her a nice clean, like, all right, here it is, don't miss, please. And he had just said, please don't let me get hacked to death. And she hacks him. Oh, I thought it was gonna take maybe 2 or 3 swings, but no. She hacks him, hits the shoulder blade, has to peel the sword off of him, and then slices his head off, and his head goes tumbling and rolling onto the ground. And I was like, oh, poor Rhys Ifans, or Ralph Fiennes, whatever his name is. Oh, the poor guy here. He's so good as Otto Hightower, but fucking Rhaenyra. That chop, and just like, the poor body laying on the ground too, and like, you know, him just being like, oh, you know, like, fuck, that hurts, but it's not gonna kill me. And then finally she slices the head and the body's just on the ground, and you could just see the gash in the shoulder blade versus where she cut at the neck. You know, like she was a good 4 inches off of where she should have hit him, and then Otto's head's just on the ground, just lifeless, just, oh. But so this is like the first man Rhaenyra has killed, and it's her father's former hand and former, advisor, and Alicent's father, right? Like, she knew Otto, and she was fairly close with him, and even Otto was like, if only your father could see how far we've come, you know? Like, this was not Viserys' dream at all. This is not what he wanted. If Viserys was still alive, he would claw out his one good eye. But so after Rhaenyra makes Otto's head roll on the floor, Daemon takes back the blade and friggin' lops off Lord Jasper's head with the swiftness. Just as he's talking, he's like, tell my wife, you know, and you could tell how just much Daemon has wielded that sword and how much training he has, because he slices the head off one swing, no problem, where Rhaenyra took 2 swings. But then we end with this phenomenal shot of Rhaenyra stepping through Otto's blood, leaving blood footsteps as she ascends the Iron Throne, and we get a shot of the Iron Throne waiting for Rhaenyra in the reflection of Otto's blood. Like, it's just a phenomenal shot, and we finally get to see Rhaenyra like she was always meant to, climb the throne and sit down, and we think that this is the end. But Alicent and Helena got caught, and they get rushed in by the Gold Cloaks because they didn't make it out of King's Landing, and they're rushed right up to see Rhaenyra had just cut off her father's head, and Alicent looks down at the body and like looks up at Rhaenyra pissed, and Rhaenyra seems to like, you know, she's kind of like, you know, catching her breath as she's sitting down on the throne. She's like, oh my god, I can't believe I finally made it to this throne. But even as she sits down, maybe it looks like maybe she cuts one of her fingers on the Iron Throne, much like Viserys when he sat the throne and it cut his finger and then he lost the hand or lost the figure. Very interesting little details there. But the fact that like Rhaenyra is sitting there and she kind of like is sad, like you can still kind of see the tears in her eyes, like I just had to cut off a man's head, and then now she's seeing Alicent and she's like, oh no, I know that this wasn't the plan, and like your plan was like 95% of the way there, but like you didn't give me Aegon. I told you I had to make an example of somebody. Your father was the first one we found. So what do you want from me? Like, yeah, this is what I had to do. So it looks like maybe Rhaenyra will not have remorse for her actions here, you know? But will like 100% be changed from this moment forward, right? Like Rhaenyra is going to have a new outlook on life type of thing. But really fascinating episode, and that's credits on episode 2. And just the fact that like Rhaenyra is sitting on that throne and she's got the sword, and the sword is Jace's sword. That really made me touched with feelings. I was like, her firstborn baby is always going to be with her because she's got his sword by his side. And like, you know, all the last 2 seasons, that sword, we never necessarily saw Jace use, but he always had like his hands on it, right? Like every scene Jace was in, he always had his hands like propped up, balancing on that sword. So like, it was like there, right? Like it wasn't necessarily used, but it was always around, and it was an object that you did see Jace very fond of, and pretending, you know, playing king and pretending to be a knight, and all he wanted to do was fight for his mother in this war. And Daemon was right. He did get what he wanted. He died in battle fighting for his queen as desired. And, you know, that's not exactly what Rhaenyra wants to hear, but like as a dragon rider, you want to go out in dragon fire, no? Not exactly how Jace went out, but at least he went out fighting, you know? But just getting shot by arrows and just getting laid up in the body. I didn't think they were going to bring back the body to Dragonstone either. Just really devastating stuff. But that's it for me, y'all. I would love to hear your thoughts about House of the Dragon Season 3, Episode 2, Queen's Landing, now that the King's Landing is Queen's Landing, and the Blacks are back where they're supposed to be, back in their home in King's Landing. And yeah, fuck the Greens. And if you are Team Green, why? I mean, other than Vhagar, I can see why you like Vhagar, but like, if you're Team Green, genuinely, comment below. But Team Blacks all the way. I can't wait to see the rest of this season and where this heads. And then we only have 1 season left with Season 4. I believe that's going to be the final season. So, you know, I don't know where the season finale is going to leave us this year. But either this season is going to be absolutely nuts, or that final season is going to save like a lot of really juicy details for the end. But if the biggest thing that happens this season is Rhaenyra lopping off Otto's head and Jace dying in episode 1, I don't know. So far, through 2 episodes, Season 3 has been fucking phenomenal, and I can't wait to see Episode 3 next weekend. Make sure you guys stay tuned for that. And I would love to hear your thoughts about this episode. Drop those down in the comment section below, or you can send them to my other social medias. Links for those down in the description below. And if you made it this far and you'd like to support the channel, the best way of doing that is liking this video, commenting down below, subscribing if you haven't already, and hitting that bell so you don't miss future House of the Dragon breakdowns. You get the notifications when those come out. Once again, my name is Big Cam, and I'll see you gorgeous folks in the next video.